Hey folks, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Last Born in the Wilderness. So at this point, usually what I do is I tell you to go to the website, I tell you all the various places you can listen to this podcast, support this project through various means. I give you all that information, and I'm going to do that here in just a moment. But I first just want to thank two people very specifically. I want to thank Mark, and I want to thank Dominic. Dominic is a patron of the podcast, and Mark is somebody that's been listening to this podcast for quite a while. And I'm not going to tell you why I'm singling them out. They know why. They know why they're being singled out. They know why I'm thanking them very specifically. Thank you both very, very much. You've really helped me out a lot this month. To know that there's people out there that not only find value in this work, but are willing to actually directly help me out, it just means everything to me. I can't thank them enough. And, and this goes to every other patron as well, every other person that has donated to me, that has supported me on Patreon, that has believed in this project, that has given me positive feedback, all of that. It's just so valuable, and it's like when you do this project, you put yourself out there. You try to do something significant or valuable, and you hope that you can further the discussion, and that action, well-informed action, can come out of that. And to know people like you, Mark and Dominic and everyone else, to know people like you just makes this whole project worth it. So thank you. I mean that so much. Okay, so we'll move on with the rest of this, and I'll just want to say, if you want to learn anything about this project, you can go to the website lastborninthewilderness.com. Everything you need to know will be there, and you can find a link to that website down in the description of this episode. If you want to subscribe to this podcast, there's numerous platforms to do that on. I just recently got this podcast on Spotify, which I know is a huge platform to stream music and podcasts now. So if you are on Spotify, subscribe, listen to it there. That'd be really great. And if you want to support this project, there's a couple ways to do that. First, obviously, is just to follow this project. There's social media, but there's also the newsletter. So go down the description, you'll find a link to all that down below. And if you want to support this project monetarily, you can do so through the one-time donation link, which is through PayPal. Go to paypal.me/lastbornpodcast. There you can make a one-time donation. Treat it a bit like a tip jar. If you like this episode, if you like any other episode that I've done in particular, consider throwing a few bucks my way. That would be really, really helpful. And if you want to support this project more regularly, you want to really sustain this work, you can do so through Patreon. You go to patreon.com/lastborninthewilderness, and there you can make monthly contributions to the production of this podcast. Patrons of the podcast get early access to these interviews before the official public release. Everything I do regarding interviews, all of that is publicly available, but I just give patrons a little early access as a way to thank them. And there's none of the introduction stuff that I throw at the beginning of these episodes either. It's just the interview on the Patreon page. So consider supporting this project for $1 or more a month, and you'll gain access to all of that. And I have to thank, besides Dominic and Mark, of course, I had to sort of single them out. I have to thank so many of the patrons and the people that have believed in this project, that have been giving their time, their love to me because of this project. It's really, really gratifying to know that this is really resonating with people. One last thing I would say is if you want to drop me a line. So one thing that I've set up is that if you call this phone number, it takes you straight to a voicemail. You can leave a message up to 3 minutes, and I can include it at the beginning of these podcast episodes. And by doing that, I can respond to them, and it creates something like a feedback loop with the listeners. I'm able to respond more directly to feedback, ideas, criticisms, anything like that people may have. It's been really, really helpful for me, and it's been really gratifying to hear the voices of those that are listening to this project. So if you want to do that, you can call the phone number 208-918-2837. That is 208-918-2837. Consider calling that number, leaving me a tasty message, put it at the beginning of these episodes, and I can respond to them. Thank you all for listening to me up to this point. Here's the episode. In this episode, I speak with a representative from the Internationalist Commune of Rojava, and we discuss the ecological dimension of the Rojavan Revolution, what has been described as Make Rojava Green Again. And the individual wanted to go by the name Xabat. So I speak with Xabat about the book, about the ecological pillar, the ecological dimension of the Rojavan Revolution in what we would define as Northern Syria. So to get in kind of just very briefly, and I'm going to totally gloss over all the nitty-gritty details, and Xabat does a great job of kind of going over some of this in this interview, but in northern Syria, so when we think of Syria, we think of the brutal Assad regime and the rebels that were backed by the United States and other Western forces, and Russia getting in, and all the various geopolitical machinations of all these various world powers getting involved in Syria for their own kind of motives. But while this was happening, while this horrendous civil war was breaking out in the northern section of Syria, which is traditionally in this area, which it's a part of Turkey, Iraq, and northern Syria, we have what has been defined as Kurdistan, the region that the Kurdish populations have lived in for a very, very long time. So when Syria itself began to fracture and all of this infighting and civil war was breaking out, in northern Syria, the Kurdish and other, it's a multi-ethnic revolution. We need to understand this is an internationalist in scope revolution. There are people from all over the world that have come to this region, have been invited to participate, to not only defend the revolution against, whether it's not really Syria at this point, but mainly ISIS. We know that the Kurdish fighters, the people that have fought on behalf of the Rojavan Revolution, have very valiantly and very successfully fought ISIS, or what has been called Daesh, or the Islamic State, or whatever term you want to throw at this death cult that basically wanted to take over the region. They have very successfully pushed them back, and they have created something like an autonomous space in northern Syria to experiment, potentially building not only a much more egalitarian and feminist society, but also an ecologically centered, ecologically minded society as well. And so I was able to buy a copy of this book, Make Rojava Green Again, which was published by, I think, I could be wrong, there may be a few different places this book is now being distributed from, but I got my copy from dogsection.org, which is out of England. It's a very, very affordable copy. Even with international shipping, you can get it for a very, very reasonable price. It's this beautifully designed book that really shows the ecological dimension of this revolution, and how when we think about the Rojavan Revolution, we think about the very valiant warriors, the very valiant people, men and women that have fought on behalf of this revolution to protect it, not only from ISIS, but also from Turkey as well. Turkey is a very powerful regional player that does not have the Rojavan Revolution in mind as far as protecting or respecting their sovereignty. Turkey's had a very hostile relationship with the Kurdish people in general. Anyway, Xabat goes over all of this in this episode where we talk about the book that was released, Make Rojava Green Again, which just sort of explains the ecological dimension of this. How are they addressing the decades of intensive monoculture agriculture that has been done in the region, right? Which has only served the economic needs, I guess, or the economic incentives of Syria and Turkey and the other surrounding regions, right? It's been there to basically serve a capitalist economy. And what I really, really, really appreciate about the Rojavan Revolution is it is explicitly egalitarian, it is explicitly leftist and anti-capitalist in its principles and in its practice. That to me is what it's all about. When you think about the horrors of the Syrian civil war, which is now winding down to basically, I think it's basically over at this point, and to see this glimmer of hope, this beautiful thing emerge out of that. And again, I need to reiterate that this is internationalist in scope. This Rojavan Revolution, this isn't limited specifically to this area. There are Rojavas, or there potentially could be Rojavas everywhere. This revolution is a shining example of what's possible. And while it's certainly not perfect, and we also have to take into account the reality of the fact that this was built and is being maintained in a rather hostile context, whether it's the Islamic State or whether it's Turkey, which actually seems to be the more dire threat at this point, this revolution needs to be supported and needs to be backed. And what I found particularly fascinating about this project, Make Rojava Green Again, is that they're really trying to address the fundamental crisis of capitalism and how it's impacted the land, how it's impacted the ecologies, and that human beings can have a very creative and beautiful impact on the land. Because really what this is about is our understanding of what human beings are capable of, what human nature really is. And I think Rojava is a shining example. I'm going to use that over and over again. A shining example because it's like a glimmer of hope in a wasteland to demonstrate what is absolutely possible in these times that we're in. What true courage looks like in this time. The more beautiful world that we know is possible is being demonstrated in places like Rojava. So we really should be paying attention to it. We should be supporting it by whatever means necessary. I just want to thank Xabat for taking time to speak with me, for representing the project. If you want to learn more about Make Rojava Green Again specifically, you can go to the website, makerojavagreenagain.org. And you can also learn more about the Internationalist Commune of Rojava at internationalistcommune.com. And also I asked Xabat at the end if there's any other sources or any other sites that we should pay attention to or go look at. He mentioned the Commune Academy, and I think I'm saying that correctly. It's KOMUN-academy.com. That'll give another source of information that we can look at as well to understand what's going on there. There's those websites. There you can find Make Rojava Green Again on Facebook, and you can follow the Internationalist Commune of Rojava on Facebook and on Twitter and all the various social media sites. And I will put a link below to dogsection.org. Please go buy the book. Learn more about this ecological revolution that is currently unfolding in Rojava. It is truly inspiring in this time that we're in. And there's one last thing I want to say. In a time where people are waking up to the climate crisis, waking up to the ecological crisis that is manifesting on this planet right now, even in this time of radical change, we can look to these examples of people that are, in spite of that, doing something really sacred and beautiful and radical. Deeply, deeply radical. And so when we think about people that are supporting, say, these sort of youth climate marches and this sort of non-profit industrial complex kind of green capitalism that's now being thrown around with the Green New Deal and all of that, we need to really take a moment as leftists, as people that are anti-capitalists and that are really deeply concerned about the living systems of this planet. And we need to pause and recognize that these kinds of things are not going to actually address the problem, because the problem is capitalism. The problem is an economic system that demands infinite growth. But the financialization of ecosystems, of nature, which is implicit in this sort of fourth industrial revolution that's being unfolded right now, we need to really take pause and recognize where our support is going. And I think by supporting people that are a part of the Internationalist Commune of Rojava, that is where our attention needs to be. Very principally anti-capitalist, egalitarian movements. That is where we need to be putting our focus. Go support them. Go support the Revolution of Rojava. This is a very, very, very important movement. That's all I got for you. Thank you, Xabat, for taking time to speak with me. Thank you so much to the Internationalist Commune of Rojava for doing what you do. And thank you for listening to me up to this point. Here is my interview with Xabat from the Internationalist Commune of Rojava. Well, thank you for doing this. So you are in northern Syria right now, in what has been defined as Rojava. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, like we call it Rojava. That's right. But a little bit more wide. We talk about the northeastern Syria.
Okay. And there was a book that came out, I believe, if I remember correctly, last year. Called Make Rojava Green Again. And I picked this book up and I've been reading it and I've really enjoyed it a lot, because it's not only is it a beautifully designed book, an incredibly well-written book, but it exposes the world to the ecological dimension of the Rojavan Revolution. what is trying to be done regarding trying to kind of get away from certain destructive agricultural practices and trying to connect the people back with the land, reforestation, learning how to recycle, reuse various things like water and all of that. And it's really, really fascinating to me because I care very deeply about the ecological component to any sort of revolution. To be able to understand that if we don't have a connection with the land, if we don't develop systems that are ecologically sound, then there's really no point in doing it. It's like that's a big component to me. So seeing this book come out and reading it and getting a deeper understanding of what's happening in Rojava through that dimension has been really helpful to me. So I'm really, again, thankful that I had the chance to meet with somebody, to talk with somebody about this. And I just want to ask, what is this project, Make Rojava Green Again? What are some of the basic principles of this project? How was it founded, and how is it? I know these are very big questions, but what are some of the basic principles of what it is?
Well, first of all, we also wanted to thank for having the chance to spread the ideas of the revolution and our works. This is also part of our work and our duty as internationalists in Rojava to raise the awareness outside Rojava about this project here. So in this sense, also thanks a lot. To the book and the campaign Make Rojava Green Again. Well, as internationalists here, we always thought about what is our role here, what can be our contribution to this revolution. And since many of us were already involved in ecological struggles, took also a big awareness with them already to Rojava, we also saw the problems, the difficulties here in these times to strengthen the ecological work in Rojava. So it was also something that was a need here for the structures to increase this work. So we discussed a lot with the structures here of the self-administration about the ecological problems, about solutions, about projects that are already happening. And this is part of our book. We are kind of trying to share this information with the outside about the ecological situation here. And after these discussions, we thought where is the place to contribute to this work. And it was clear that one of the major problems is the problem of a lack of diversity and a lack of trees actually in this region. So we started with this campaign. One of the main pillars of this campaign is a small tree nursery and to plant new trees. So with the help, with the support of people from outside Rojava, with the money of people, we started here to plant trees. So this is kind of one of the main line of this campaign to help in the practical works that needs to be done here on the ground. Another aim of this campaign, it's kind of also to share on the more technical level, getting informations about specific technical problems that are the society facing here related to ecological problems, concerns. So to exchange knowledge. It's also one of the the works we are trying to do, and on the more brighter level, on ideological level, our question is actually how can we develop an ecological democratic society, not only in Rojava but also all around the world, because the ecological problems we are facing today. The problems we are facing today. For example, global warming, issues like this, they are not just limited, let's say, to the region like in Rojava or the Middle East, but these are problems we see all around the world. So also the solutions has to be a global, and so to this level of an ideological questions we wanted to contribute, because we think that this revolution, the ideas of this revolution, can also be an answer not only for the Middle East. That's kind of we can say that this campaign is kind of a bridge between the outside between activists, scientists, people who just want to help with donations, and the revolution in Rojava, the people here and the projects here. So this is kind of like the basic ideas of this campaign.
Right. Yeah, and what I really deeply appreciate is that witnessing what's happening in Rojava again from the outside, I see people that have gone in there that have participated in this in some form or another. This is an international movement in a lot of ways. What's happening there is something that is being reflected. I think people are seeing how valuable what you and everybody a part of this revolution is doing, and especially considering, I think people, especially where I'm sitting, I'm here in the United States, many people have a very, very two-dimensional, very shallow, often, I would say, understanding of what is happening, not only in the Middle East, but within the Syrian civil war and the whole conflict in that region. And then to see this thing that has emerged out of it in Northern Syria, to see this real attempt to build an egalitarian society, and then to not only build an egalitarian society, but then to include the ecological health of that region into its practice, I think is a shining example of what's possible. I think for me, I get so almost depressed or downtrodden in a lot of ways at seeing how we live with our land, how food is produced, how everything becomes commodified within the logic of a capitalist system. And when I see that there are whole groups of people that are actively working to not only unravel that, but then to build something better, it's like an incredibly inspiring thing. Like I can't express enough how inspiring it is to see this happening. But yeah, what you're saying is like, okay, so this is happening here. How can we then bridge that gap between activists, between scientists, between all these people that are doing their own work, and within the space of Rojava, begin these projects of encouraging ecological diversity, biological diversity, and all of that, bring the soil back to its proper health, making sure that the soil is healthy again. If you could talk a bit about why is it that Rojava has experienced, this region in Northern Syria, why it has experienced such severe ecological issues? Like what has contributed to the deforestation, to the pollution, to the lack of ability to get good water, a good supply of water? Like all of these things are addressed in the book. If you could go over that a little bit, I would love to hear about that.
For sure. So like the ecological situation in Rojava, we cannot analyze just from the perspective on the land here. We have to consider like the geopolitical situation in general, and also in specific the policies of the Turkish state and the Syrian state. So the land here in Rojava was mainly treated like a traditional colony by the Syrian regime, by the centralistic nation state of Syria. So the policy was one aspect of it was exploitation, related to oil, for example, related to the food production. So Rojava is actually kind of the canton, specifically Canton Cizire, where the biggest cities like Haseke, Kamishlu, Direk. This region was kind of like the food, the wheat supply for not only the society in Rojava, but for whole Syria. So we are facing here in this region a big problem of monoculture, especially of grain, but also it was used for the production of cotton. As you probably know, like cotton is a really intense, it needs a lot of water to grow cotton in this region. So this is one of the biggest problems related to agriculture here. The products were then brought to the more urban areas of Syria, big cities like Homs and areas where these products got like fabricated. So also here there's a lack of kind of like the ability to, for example, use the oil to produce actually like benzene for the cars. So that's a traditional, like a classical colonial approach was applied here to this region. It was for many decades it was forbidden for the society, for example, to grow their own vegetables in their garden. It was forbidden to plant trees. And this led to this extreme monoculture. At the same time, when we are seeing like one of the biggest problems in Syria is the lack of water. Like actually there are big rivers like Euphrat, Tigris that are coming from, we call it Bakur, like the northern part of Kurdistan. It means like the east of Turkey, like this region that is controlled by the Turkish nation state. It's a Kurdish area, and like the population is Kurdish, but it's controlled since many years. So in this area, all the rivers, like the springs of these big rivers are. And the Turkish state is using like big dams to control this water. So to control the water supply that is coming from Turkey to Syria and going further on, for example, to Iraq. So we always say like water, like the control of water is like it's a weapon in this war against the revolution here. And it was used, and it is used as a mechanism for putting pressure on the region here. It's in like Turkey is increasing actually the building of the dams, so that they can control the water. The same time, along the border line to Turkey, it's also a big agriculture area for Turkey. So they drilled lots of deep wells to get the groundwater. And this leads to the level of groundwater in Rojava, it's actually year by year going further down. So the wells have to be like deeper and deeper, and the reservoirs of the groundwater is actually becoming less. So in this sense, like Turkey is playing like a war. It's not only a military, in the sense, a military war, but also on an economical, environmental questions. Well, in the sense, and other areas, like to add maybe in the canton around Kobane and Afrin, it was mainly used for the production of oil. Olive oil. You probably also heard now this scandal that Turkey is actually selling the olive oil that is produced in Afrin. Afrin is the region that's currently occupied by Turkish forces. So they are actually exploiting the resources there and selling them, even using this money to pay like Islamist gangs to fight this war against the revolution in Rojava. So this we have to consider, like the impact, for example, on climate change is really heavily felt here. For example, in this spring, like it's starting now, people say since 22, 23 years, it didn't rain so much. So we have a big problem actually that the climate is changing here, and that the agriculture, and as like last year it was about 80% of the grain that was used to be harvested, was a lack of grain then. And this year it will be the same. So the change of the climate has a big impact here in this region as well. There are many more problems, let's say, like, for example, the waste. You mentioned it already, the question of like recycling. All this technology was not placed in this region of Rojava. It was mainly, if it was available and used, it was used in the areas where the regime is like traditional strongholds of the regime. So all these questions, the society here is trying to find new answers, to experiment with new technology, to experience with new ways of production. So and then, like especially in agriculture, a lot of things have changed already. Like for example, the percentage of the production of crops. It's now like more or less 50%, we can say, from the total area. 25% of the land is cultivated by like plants that like for example lentils, chickpeas, beans that are not so water intense. So to reduce on one hand side to reduce the use of water, at the other side to diversify the agriculture. So in the sense like there are already some steps are made, but for sure it is. Like it can be just the beginning of a green revolution, let's say.
Right. Yeah. The as it's mentioned in the book, the capitalist mode of production when it comes to agriculture is really just based on kind of it's a growth model. It's like, how can we maximize agricultural production? How can we push that as far as possible? And it doesn't take into account the health of the soil. If the soil is depleted of nutrients, then they're just going to dump a bunch of chemical fertilizers or, pesticides and herbicides on this land. Of course, that has detrimental impacts to the people that work those fields, that live on that land. And of course, it has long-term implications for the soil itself and the health of the soil. And then you take also the fact that massive regions have been deforested in order to make room for these monoculture projects. So I can imagine that the work that you're doing, and well, not just you obviously, but you and everyone that is there, that is, what I find so, I guess, international in its scope. What I see is that so many parts of the planet are experiencing things similar to what the people in this region in Rojava have experienced. I could say that where I live in a part of the United States that's very agricultural, and almost all of it is monoculture. And when I think about when the capitalist system stops functioning and how are people going to know how to grow food, people aren't going to know because we've relied so thoroughly on monoculture agricultural methods that we won't know what to do in the face of something like that. So I think the value
that's right.
Yeah, and I see the value of what not only of what you're doing just ecologically, but how those decisions are made, right? This is a collective decision-making process. This is something that I'm deeply inspired by. So I want to ask, when decisions like this need to be made, right? How are we going to use the soil? How are we going to reforest? How are we going to bring about biological diversity in the region? How are those decisions made? How is the ecological dimension of this revolution presented within the context of a kind of an egalitarian social model? Does that make sense? Like how are collective decisions made?
Totally, yes.
Yeah, how are collective decisions made in regards to this?
Well, first of all, we have to say like the principle of this, the three principles of this revolution, and then like to build an ecological society, like the pillar of women's revolution, like the women's revolution, the women's liberation, and radical democracy. So already in the pillars, like this aspect of ecology, to overcome the annihilation of the human being, of the nature, is already implemented. But of course, like we have to see how this in practice and daily life, and of course it's a difficult process. It's a revolution. So that means like to change also the mentality of the people. So to change the way people are thinking, to how they address nature and so on. And one of the big when we see the impact of all this policy I just mentioned is kind of like that the society got disconnected from the land. So also you mentioned the knowledge about the desertification of agriculture, the knowledge about producing their own food and stuff like this. It is over the years with this policy of the centralized nation state, it got lost in society. So also this is something we have to claim back. We have to recover again here, what were traditional ways of production, of agriculture production here in this region, what kind of traditional crops were growing here, trees were growing here, all the things that has to be recovered new. But of course, the knowledge is still in the society. We have to just dig it out again. To the question of the the principle of the radical democratical way of making decisions, the smallest entity is the commune. Like it can be like one street in a city. It's kind of like one street. In the village, it's kind of like one neighborhood, stuff like this. So really on the bottom, on the society, people are discussing the problems they are facing in daily life and trying to find solutions for this. And if they cannot reach solutions because also maybe the problems or the questions are related to the bigger frame, for example, to the city, to the municipality, to maybe even the whole canton, like this questions and discussions are passed on to like the next level, where not only like one street or one neighborhood is sitting together, but maybe like representatives, like people from the whole neighborhood or from the whole city. So this is kind of like the way how decisions are made here. In the context of the ecological works, we have to say that in many points, like we are facing the problem of the awareness of the people, and also the economical aspect in it. Like now to diversify the agriculture also means like to find new like with the traditional, like not the traditional, like how the agriculture system works right now, like with there's a need for crop, there's a need for wheat in the region, so it is like also something really easily for farmers to produce. So it's also more risk for them to change the system right now if they just see their personal interest and their personal situation. So it is also to change the awareness of the people. Like here, you mentioned already, this revolution is fascinating because this is really something fundamental, not to implement laws and by force, like changing the way of production, changing the structure of society, but more with long-term discussions. So in some villages, you have to discuss for years to implement a new way of like a more ecological and cooperative way of production. But it works. Like we can see many examples where after this long process, now there are cooperatives like for working on the land, but also for example, domestication of animals and stuff like this. So this is kind of like the way the system here like is functioning, but it takes a long time and it needs a lot of patience for all of us like who are working and living here. But like this is kind of like the general understanding of not only in the context of the ecological aspects, but for example, in the case of water, now like the committee that is responsible for this area is 2 years ago counted all the real wells that are existing to get an overview. Sometimes like implementing watches to see how much water is actually used to get an idea what is the need and what is how can we reduce the use of water in the sense. Now you are not allowed to open new wells without getting registered in it, so that there's actually an overview about it. In some areas, also in the canton of Cizire, there is an implementation of natural reserves. And sometimes, of course, there are conflicts, from one day to another day. Farmers cannot use their tradition, their monocultural way of production in these areas, anymore, because it's forbidden to use kind of fertilizer. It's forbidden to use pesticides. So, now then we have to find solutions. How can a more ecological way of production look like? But in most of the cases, or in all the cases, actually try to do this process together with the society on the bottom, on the people who are first affected by the questions, and actually to the need also for them to find new ways and solutions for the problem.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think it's I really. It is an inspiring thing to see that there are people at the grassroots level that are concerned about these things. Obviously, it's impacting them directly, so they're concerned. But to me, I guess I'm speaking, again, way over here in the United States, where the mentality that people generally have is a very self-centered one. It's like, how do I protect my family and me and my well-being? They don't think about themselves being a part of often being a part of a bigger community. So it baffles me, but it's, again, incredibly inspiring as well to know, and I know it's not perfect, and I know that this is, like you said, it requires patience, it requires several months or years of working these issues out among everybody, but the fact that people are willing to work that out, that people are willing to understand, okay, what I do on my with my agricultural work is impactful of everyone else's work as well, and everybody else's livelihood. The amount of water that I use to grow this particular crop in this way is really impactful on the whole, ability of other people to have access to water as well. And again, that's kind of the spirit of the revolution, I think, and the education that is, ingrained in it is like learning how, and I imagine people over there are far more advanced in that regard anyway, but having that mentality, that understanding, that collective understanding that, what happens in my patch of land isn't my patch of land, it's everybody's. This is, like you mentioned, what's going on in, say, Turkey, which is just right across the border, what they're doing with their dams and their the way that the water flows through that region is really impactful. So it's like everything is connected. And that's the real ecological perspective that I find really inspiring and interesting and fascinating about this revolution, is like there is that understanding that is embedded in the very processes of the revolution. And so I wanted to ask, like, just some kind of, something that the book goes over in detail is like how, for instance, like things that we don't, like for me, for instance, I don't think about, but like, all right, so everybody, what do you do with sewage, right? What do you do with waste? Instead of just throwing it away and it gets taken to some landfill somewhere, in Rojava, people really have to address like, okay, where does the water go? Okay, we have limited supply of water. When I take a shower or when I bathe, what happens to that water? When, I flush the toilet or whatever, wherever the waste, the sewage goes, that has an impact on us too. So, in approaching some of these issues, like how to recycle and reuse the resources you have, what are some of the kind of solutions, I guess, to say the reusing of water or, making fertilizer or anything like that? Are there any specific things that you and everyone else there has been working on in that regard as well?
We as the campaign Make Rojava Green Again, we are trying to find basic solutions for this kind of questions, like solutions like also on a technological aspect that can be like implemented everywhere with low budget, based on the resources you can get here. So maybe that's also the difference how we work here to other NGOs or like cooperatives that are bringing like stuff from outside to kind of like high technological, ecological friendly technology. I don't know. So what we are trying is like to use lots of knowledge, especially from areas that are similar to Rojava, having like same, for example, problems with water, same kind of like agricultural problems. So what we are building in the moment and in practice is to like set up like a system of like to recycle the water, to separate for one of the like general steps that can be done is to separate water. So for example, the water out of the kitchen, out of the bathroom, like of the shower, can be treated way easier than, for example, as you said, like black water or gray water. So that is kind of like the steps. We are trying to build a system for our own place, to be a model, like an example that we can show to other people, to explain them and to encourage them also to do similar projects. Like a really pragmatic way, it means like to build filter systems, even the black water can go through, and then to find out which trees, for example, are more resisting against this kind of like recycled water, who can deal with this kind of of water. And for example, olive trees are kind of like can handle this this water, so you can use it again for kind of like watering, for example, trees. You cannot use it for agriculture so easily because it's like also health dangerous for healthcare. But these are like really pragmatical things we are trying to establish here. Another question of is energy. For example, we made a call, like an open call, to ask people to support us in establishing in like a wind turbine. Not all the areas here are suitable for this, but even this is really hard to measure. Like you have to find good places and stuff like this. But first of all, it's like kind of also to implement the idea in this region that something like this is possible and can work out, to find people who know to build this kind of systems with to recycle things. Like for example, what do you use as to like motor? Like you can use things you find easily here, but you have to know it. So batteries can be recycled as well. Stuff like this. As I said, we are trying to find basic solutions. Like I think there are usually on the market 8 different types of plastic. So which one can you recycle easily? How, like some of them you can recycle by heating up them to 100 degrees, and you can give them a new shape. So all this, we are experimenting, and there are also some other projects. But in the end, we have also to be honest, the war still continues. Even Daesh is in the last phase the war is ending soon against Daesh, but the war against Turkey, Turkey is occupying the land here, and they will continue to also increase their military operations in this area. And until then, it will be really hard also to establish this kind of projects on a bigger scale, and establishing them as a system in the society, because it requires lots of financial, technological material to set up systems like this. Even they are decentralized, what we are aiming for, still they need lots of concentration on this kind of projects, and lots of the economy here it's running for the self-defense of the population. Because if we don't manage to defend this revolution, there will be also no space actually for this kind of projects and experiments. So we also see this as a necessity in the moment. Even we are trying to get the capacities to experiment, but also our works is often shaped by the necessities of the war. So sometimes also we have to stop our works, for example, planting trees, to focus more on media works or communication works outside Rojava, to reach an awareness about the situation here, and I'm not able to concentrate so much on the works on the ground. So it will take a while to establish functioning alternative systems, but in many aspects also the first steps are made in the system here, as I mentioned before, especially in agriculture. But yeah, there's still a long way to go, let's say.
Yeah, and I wanted to, and we mentioned, of course, that this is situated within a war. This war isn't over, and it's not as simple as defeating Daesh or ISIS or whatever name it's been, described as. And while they may be disappearing on some level, again, I find this actually a bit confusing. And if you could answer this for me. What is Rojava and the Kurdistan and this whole region? What is its relationship with Syria? Is it still technically within the borders of Syria? Is there certain, does the Syrian government still impose its will and presence in the region, or is it sort of left to its own? I wanted to ask that.
So when we look back, how the revolution started here, most of the institutions, the state institutions, the military, were kind of kicked out of this region without a war. There was a general uprising in the society, step by step. The people were from the regime were asked you're free to leave now, otherwise we have to use violence. So the regime left most of this area. There are small areas inside the city of Kamishlu and the city of Heseke that are still controlled by regime forces, but also this number is not big. It is more like a tactical thing also to leave them there. On the military aspect, they don't have any presence in this region anymore. So that's but they also have the freedom, for example, in this neighborhoods, their control to have civil institutions in this area. And there's always the open, the administration of the revolution is always open for negotiation, for talks, and it also happened in the past. We have to remember like the time also in the war, and when the war in Afrin started, also the Syrian regime was sending some troops to defend the borders. Actually, the administration of the revolution here always said it like it's also the responsibility actually of the regime to become active in violation against the international law. For example, when Turkish troops were passing over the border, this is not acceptable. The revolution here, we are challenging the nation state on an ideological and on the practical level. Like the institutions here are an alternative to a nation state, but the aim of the revolution here was never to separate each other from the Syrian territorial or even declare an own nation state. And in this sense, like the aim is, it's called like a democratic nation. So how can we democratize not only the areas in Rojava, but slowly also other parts of Syria? Because this revolution will not survive with just focusing on its own. So there's a constant process also on growing, and the same strategy. It was for many years it was used also in Turkey, like the war against the Turkish state, against the Turkish military, always implemented also on the other side, like working together with the society in metropoles like Istanbul, for example, Ankara, and so on. So the aim is to democratize the society in general. It doesn't matter if Kurds, Arabs, Christian, Muslims, and so on. So in this sense, there need to be also kind of like a solution, an agreement with the Syrian state in general, and this proposal was made. Like if the Syrian nation state, the centralistic state, is willing to give autonomy in a cultural and a political way, there will be no big problem with nation states. Even like the process of democratization will continue, like to build civil institutions, to organize society. Of course, this process will continue. But in this sense, I think that was kind of like an answer to your question. No?
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of again, because it is a geopolitical. I mean, again, like I mentioned at maybe the beginning or at some point, but like this isn't an isolated place. This place is connected to what is happening in the region constantly, and as you said, doing all of this ecological work is directly in relation to what is possible within the context of a war, right? The people of Rojava, the Kurdish people, and everybody involved in this has been fighting against not only Daesh, but also to a great degree, obviously, the incursion of Turkey in their efforts. I think and I guess maybe that's the other side of it. I want to ask is like, how difficult has Turkey? I know that Turkey, of course, has invaded numerous times, and of course they've allowed. There's a lot of information to show that ISIS or Daesh has been aided directly by Turkey. But how difficult has Turkey itself, the state of Turkey, made it for not only the ecological component of this revolution, but just the sovereignty of the Turkish and internationalist people involved in this revolution?
I just yesterday discussed with a Kurdish friend here about the end of Daesh and like the difficulties and all these questions, and he said like, yeah, we will celebrate if we defeated Daesh, but we have to be honest, like the end of Daesh is only reach when the end to the Erdogan regime in Turkey. So it is obvious, like there are so many proofs that the Turkish state, the Turkish military, the Turkish secret service is were supporting Daesh in so many ways, and it shows the ideological, how near this both the AKP regime and Turkey and Daesh is, from their mentality, from their way to fight against the Kurdish population and the other minorities in Rojava and in Kurdistan in general. So this is something I wanted to underline. The works here, it's really difficult under the permanent threat, and not only the ecological works are affected by it, but all the civil works are affected by it. So there's no possibility for long-term planning, to long-term investment. On all these levels, it is a really difficult situation at the moment, and it will only change if the policy of Turkey will change. A system like the centralistic Turkish state that is from the beginning, with the founding of the nation state in Turkey, it is a really deep fascist mentality in this. We just have to remember the genocide against the Armenian people, against the Laz people, against the Kurdish population, and as long as this system in Turkey exists, there will be always the threat of fascist invasion, not only in Kurdistan but also in other parts. We just have to remember how Turkey tries to influence the policy in Iraq, and not only the Kurdish people are affected by it. This is something we have to be sure about, and that's why also we are kind of an ecological campaign and ecological work, because we are seeing this connection. We have to get involved also in this geopolitical questions, and we have to say something against this invasions and the plans also on further invasions of the Turkish state. But I think it is more and more people are also aware about it, the game that Turkey is playing here, because it is a completely contradiction to a free and democratic society, self-organized, based on women's rights. It is a difficult situation, but in the end, we think also that a system like this cannot live forever. The will from the society, also in Turkey, even there's not so much protest in the moment, or not so visible protest, with the hunger strikes, especially of Leyla Güven, the HDP parliamentarian. Now 700 prisoners in the Turkish prison went on an indefinite hunger strike to break the isolation of Abdullah Öcalan. He gives the idea for this revolution in Syria and Rojava. He's the kind of the inspiration for this revolution, and as long as he's imprisoned and in completely isolation, there will be also no way to solve this conflict, and on a diplomatic, on a political level. So what we are also as the campaign, also the friends here, the internationalists and Rojava, are always claiming for, is to break this isolation against Öcalan. He got imprisoned in 1999. So since then he's in an island called Imrele. He's imprisoned there. So this is a really, really important thing, not only for all the aspects of this revolution here.
Yeah, thank you for going over that. And it's I feel a lot of things, and one thing I feel is just tremendous respect, and I have a lot of to understand the courage that is required to do what you're doing, because any examination of history, and you see these egalitarian revolutions that emerge. One example that always pops up in my mind is the Spanish Revolution during the Spanish Civil War, and what ultimately happened, and how that spirit still lives on in some form or another, and it manifests in all kinds of different ways throughout the world. And so to see what is happening in Rojava, and that it is a rather precarious situation. And so the need and the absolute imperative to make it an international revolution, which it's always been from the beginning, and I totally recognize that, but to understand that everybody in the world needs to understand what's happening there. Everybody needs to understand what valuable, it's like creating not only the material conditions for revolution and the revolutionary process, but it's also something like a spirit of revolution. It's like an infectious quality that comes with understanding what's possible. When you can kind of see through, I guess, the nonsense that is constantly flung at people when they think that, oh, this type of thing just isn't even conceivable. And then to see that in what seems to be the most unlikely place in the world for it to happen, again, being completely outside of the situation, not knowing what, of course, it's like to be there and to experience it yourself, but to have that kind of stereotypical idea of what's supposed to happen in the Middle East, and then to know that this is happening there, it like completely goes up against all of the bullshit, excuse my language, but all the nonsense that people often hear. And to know that it's a feminist revolution, that it's about, providing a space for autonomous, for women to be autonomous and to have, control over their own lives and their own bodies, to not be subjected to the will of the patriarchy and patriarchal systems, and to know that there is this deep ecological component to it as well, and that it's based on the principles of essentially a form of communism or anarchism or whatever manifested, whatever form it comes in, an egalitarian ethos that runs through it. I cannot speak more highly of what you and everyone a part of this thing has been able to do, especially within the context of an ongoing war. And you have one of the most belligerent, fascistic states that's right there, right next door. And it's constantly trying to, in some form or another, undermine this revolution, undermine what's happening. And that is why I want to ask you if people from all over the world have come to participate in this revolution. In particular with Make Rojava Green Again, this project, the ecological dimension of this revolution, but also just, in any aspect of the Rojavan Revolution, what can people do to help? How can I or anybody that is on any other part of the world that is witnessing what is happening, aside from obviously going there and participating in person, but what other ways can we all contribute to this thing?
Well, you mentioned already some aspects I wanted to also to underline. Like, first of all, as you said, it's not the revolution of the Kurds. It's not the revolution of the Arabs here. It's all our revolution. We see ourselves in the tradition, for example, of the Paris Commune. We have to understand that really this revolution, as you also said, it is the inspiration of the revolution of the 21st century. So kind of like it's all the duty of everyone who called themselves revolutionary has to find ways to support this revolution. I totally go with you in the sense. Because also on an ideological level, if we study like Abdullah Öcalan, like what he's proposing is not just a solution for the Middle East, but he's proposing a solution for ecological, democratical, all the crisis this capitalist system is running through in the moment. So I want to encourage everyone also to pick up his books and to read, because also he got inspired by many people that are familiar to us as well as, like, let's say, leftist anarchists or whoever. Like, for example, the influence on Murray Bookchin on Öcalan, it's huge. Like, if you read Öcalan, you will find Murray Bookchin's incredible like he was so inspiring for Öcalan. You will find his positive way of seeing the human being as like the second nature, in the sense how Bookchin is explaining it, and also the beauty in the world and the human being. So it's not like a revolution that is really far away on a geographical level yet it is, but on the ideological level, no, it is not. So it is kind of like Öcalan just took up the heritage of the revolutionaries and the revolutionary ideologies and theories that were existing and living before him. So also we have to do this. Like, we have to see carefully what is going on here. What can we learn from here? So, as revolutionaries, we are here. That's the main question from us. Like, how can we contribute? But also, how can we learn from this? Really to become one with this revolution. But of course, like, there are also many kind of like really practical things. What we are asking people is to get involved, like organize themselves in solidarity structures. Like even in the United States, I know there are people in New York, for example, the emergency committee for Rojava exists in New York. There are groups like Demand Utopia that are like really working on the Kurdish cause and trying also to think in this way, like what can we learn from the ideology and the practice here. So there are many groups, many structures, and that's one thing, like to build up committees for the defense of this revolution, because we cannot, like, this revolution will not be defended only here on the ground, but it will be defended if millions of people rise up against the Turkish fascism. So this is a really important point, especially for the US. Like, I think all our friends and comrades in the US should ask themselves, like, how can we push also our government? Like, I mean, Turkey is member of the NATO. It's the second biggest NATO army. So the influence on even America is here on the ground, which is no guarantee for peace at all. We just have to remember the history of American foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. It always brought war and death with it. So at the same time, it's giving lots of weapons to Turkey. So these are the weapons who are killing our comrades, for example, in Afrin, defending the revolution. So especially in the US, I want to encourage people to become active on this topic as well, and don't get stuck in this like superficial contradictions. Like the support of the US, for example, it is a tactical support from the US, and it's a tactical step from the movement here. Everyone knows the real face of the American imperialism. There's no doubt about it, and like especially leftists shouldn't get confused by it. Like this, especially for our friends in the US.
Yes.
The ecological work, what we need, to say it really honest and really clear, is money. We cannot even the tree nursery, we started this project. Trees are growing slow, but on the other side, they are a project for long term. Mm-hmm. But we need money to buy equipment, for example, to buy water systems, to build, for example, the black water system, to buy trees, to plant them, to take care about them. So this is something everyone can do, and there's also the possibility on our website, like Make Rojava Green Again donate, where we are collecting money from all the people who want to become part of it.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I just want one last question, and I just want to touch on the Internationalist Academy. I'm just reading from your book that it's been under construction since the summer of 2017, and that's kind of the center of bringing internationalists and sort of getting everybody on the same page, right? Educating people on, I imagine there's, I don't know how many different languages that people are speaking. You've got, of course, everybody's like has different ideas of what a feminist revolution or what an ecological revolution or what communal decision making is like. But to get everybody on the same page, it seems to be what the Internationalist Academy that is currently, as you say, as I said in this book, is under construction. But if you could talk a bit about what that academy is and some of what it's trying to accomplish.
Well, like the book, we made some progress. Still, there are some things are missing, and like there's like the daily works and stuff like this, like this kind of like places, and you have to constantly work on them. But in general, like we are finished and with the main works there. And yes, it's right. Like people from all over the world are coming, and like to create a common understanding of this revolution and also the meaning of this revolution, not also only on the Middle East but all around the world. So it is it's a great chance like to meet all these different people, for example, I never met before. So like also to discuss and to connect between each other, like to share their experience. We always say like the capitalist modernity, like the times we are living in right now, the oldest problems, we will not understand them if we are just looking at them as from our personal perspective, from our cultural, social background perspective. So we have to discuss and we have to exchange our perspective on them, also to find appropriate solutions for them. So also to live here with lots of internationals is also like a big chance for everyone. Of course, also it's important to work and live in between the society here in Rojava. The academy is part of the Internationalist Commune of Rojava, which is kind of like the political structures for the internationalists here to come here, like to have a frame to reflect, a frame to organize, a frame to arrive here and to get education on the basic ideological principles this revolution based on. We mentioned some of them already, but it also goes more in deep, for example, the history of the revolution, the history of the Middle East. If we don't try to understand them, we will also not be able to understand the revolution here. And from there, people are encouraged to go into the practical works, let it be Make Rojava Green Again, like the ecological works, but also in the society. So friends left, for example, to hospitals to work there. Friends are working in the youth structures in different cities. So it's kind of let's say, the base for the internationalists here. But of course, also our works, what we are doing right now, it's also the place to answer questions for journalists, to receive, we're receiving many requests from outside how people can help. So that's also a work by itself. So people are also encouraged to stay in the structures and to participate and to keep the structure also alive and working. We see in the long term, let's be a bit utopian. We have to build a worldwide democratic confederal system. And how does it start? It starts with people getting to know each other, structures getting to know each other, perspectives are exchanged and discussed and further developed. And in the sense and the spirit, we also see the Internationalist Commune.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for going over that. And I really appreciate you taking time to speak with me about this. I can't speak more highly of what's going on, what you and everyone there has been doing. And I mean, it's from where I'm sitting, I would love to be able to go and visit someday and participate in this in some form or another. But I know that a lot of people can't. So knowing how to help, I know you went over that a little earlier, monetarily, of course, is really important. But there's all kinds of ways that people can share the ideas of this revolution. I just want to ask, I know that I'm just looking here at the back of the book. There's the Make Rojava Green Again.org. There's that website. There's also the internationalistcommune.com website. And there's also the Facebook page, and there's a Twitter page as well. Are there any other resources that you would want to direct people towards? Any other recommendations or anything like that you want to direct people towards regarding this?
For the ecological works in Rojava, unfortunately, these are the only good pages that are also available in English and other languages. So unfortunately, we cannot direct people to other websites. And but what I wanted to mention is one project we really see as a pure new project, as a really a light on the horizon for the women structures here. It's called Jinvar. It's a Gund, it's currently it's a village that was near now finished, built it up, a place for women to live in an autonomous, self-organized way. We wanted to recommend this to everyone to get inspiration from this project. It's called Jinvar. You will also find it in the internet. This is what we wanted to mention.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I would love if you maybe after this, if you could if you wanted to, of course, send me a few of these things, that particular thing. If there's any information, I can share it when I release this episode. So I really just want to thank you for taking time to speak with me. As I've said over and over again, this is an incredibly inspiring thing, and both on a very practical level, but just the spirit of it is just so inspiring to me, to see and know that this is happening.
We also wanted to thanks, and we really I wanted to say it again, even the fight maybe in the capitalist centers like the US, it seems difficult. One of the revolutionary duties is to be hopeful, to develop the will for the revolution, the belief in it. So I'm fully convinced that one day there will be also democratic autonomy built and lived by the people and the different identities in the United States.
Yes, I hope so as well. I want that to be the case as well. So, and again, seeing all the practical ways that comes about, even in Rojava and other parts of the world, in other parts of history, we've seen examples of this. We know this is possible. So it's just a matter of having that will, of building those resources and that ability, and doing what you can with what you have where you're at. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to Last Born in the Wilderness. Have a wonderful week, and as the psychedelic bard Terence McKenna said, take it easy, dude, but take it.